Welcome, everybody. Can you all hear me? Wonderful. I'm so excited to see all of you here today on this beautiful day. For those of you who've been doing this for a couple of years, we've been sweating our hearts out on Juneteenth in the past, and we couldn't have asked for a better day today, so let's enjoy it. Yes. And I want to extend that round of applause to Bruno for all of his drumming. Thank you, Bruno. And thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning for the 7th community gathering of Reading Frederick Douglass here in Natick. My name is Nikki Lefebvre. I'm the executive director of the Natick Historical Society. We were founded in 1870, and today we remain an independent nonprofit, and we really thrive on the generosity and energy of this community, all of you, and especially on a day like this one, I feel so grateful to get to do what I do. So thank you. I'm delighted to be co-hosting this year's event with Natick is United and with the help of the Natick Center Cultural District. It's just been really fabulous to work together, bringing this reading together and tying it with the Juneteenth celebration that will be happening on Natick Common tomorrow. We've got lots of wonderful performers and food, so you want to mark your calendar for that and make sure you're here tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. 11 a.m. Didn't want to get that one wrong. So we'll see you then. I really, really want to thank Mass Humanities, which receives funding through the Mass Cultural Council, for providing the material support for this event. And equally important, they have inspired readings of Frederick Douglass's powerful 1852 speech all over the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and now beyond it too. This is an extraordinary program, and I'm so grateful that Natick gets to be a part of it. So a round of applause for Mass Humanities. Thank you. Big thanks to Randy Brewer and Natick Pegasus for joining us every single year to make this reading accessible to a broader, absolutely, to a broader audience online and on television. And my gratitude, as always, to the intrepid Natick Historical Society team. This year, that's Eve Callahan, Emma Bartlett, Terry Evans, Leila Lamoureux, Jeff Eggleston, Mike Poyman, and Mia Kafetz, and Kyle Bolin. So thank you to all of you. And an honorary member of our team today is Heather Rockwood of the Natick Center Cultural District. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, too, to the Bagel Table for their very generous donation of the coffee. If you haven't had any yet, please get yourself a cup of coffee. And we're also delighted to have muffins from the Muffin House. Please eat them, because I don't want to take them all home. And that is courtesy of Mass Humanities. So when the reading is finished, I will recognize every single reader by name. But for now, I would like to give our readers a hearty round of applause. Really, a community reading like this one could not happen if people didn't step forward and choose to participate. And I want to note that reading this speech is hard. It's both deeply unnerving and it's achingly inspired. And if anybody needs to take a break, I encourage you to do so and find a quiet, shady spot to reflect right here on Natick Common. And now, without further ado, I'm beyond excited to have with us Dr. Brenna Greer to give us some historical context for understanding and reflecting on this speech. It's an honor to introduce her to you. Brenna Greer is an historian of race, gender, and culture in the 20th century United States. She explores historical connections between capitalism, social movements, and visual culture. Her first book, Represented, The Black Image Makers Who Reimagined African American Citizenship, examines the historical circumstances that made the media representation of black citizenship good business in the post-World War II era. Her work has been featured in the New York Times, Nation, Daily Mail, Enterprise and Society, and the Columbia Journalism Review. As an associate professor in the Department of History at Wellesley College, Greer teaches courses on World War II, the Cold War, the Black freedom struggle, consumerism and capitalism, and visual culture. And I'm very proud to tell you that she is now a longtime board member of the Natick Historical Society. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Brenna Greer.
We're good. Okay. Oh, it's so cool. This is like the 7th year, and this is the first time I haven't just been dying. So thank you, Weather. And thank you to Nikki. I always love that she says her first book. But before I say anything else, like Nikki, I really want to thank the organizations that are helping this succeed and happen in the first place. Natick Historical Society, of course. Natick is United, Natick Center Council District, Natick Pegasus, and then Mass Humanities, and by extension, Mass Cultural Council. And I really want to I have to draw attention to Nikki, because with the Natick Historical Society team, she is the force behind this happening every year. Yes. Every year she contacts me in about February and says, hey. So for those of you who haven't been keeping track, like Nikki said, this is the 7th year in a row that Natick has participated in the Reading Frederick Douglass Together program. And each year I've been honored to be given the opportunity to give these opening remarks. And as I've said in the past, that's been a challenge because I don't want to repeat myself from years past. But as I've also said in the past, thereby repeating myself, I appreciate doing this each year or year to year because it requires me to very intentionally take stock of the past year, which is a good and necessary thing, if not always easy. And after all, I'm a historian, and that's what we do, study change over time. That's the whole gig. So, as a U.S. historian who studies race and the Black freedom movement, I have both a on-the-ground and bird's-eye view of change over time as it relates to Black freedom in the United States. And that has impressed upon me 3 essential truths, which I want to share with you today. Doing so, however, requires getting pretty heavy. And I'm sensitive to being a downer because today, Juneteenth, is about celebrating freedom. But here's the thing. You can't celebrate what you don't have. You can't keep what you don't protect, and you can't fight what you don't or won't see. So, first truth, progress is a construct, and when it comes to experiences and perceptions of racial progress or social change, it's all relative. So what do I mean? Well, let's go back in time to June 19th, 1865, and it's on this day that federal troops finally arrived in Texas, which was the westernmost slave state, and enforced the emancipation of that state's enslaved population. And that's 2.5 years after Lincoln issued the proclamation, or the Emancipation Proclamation. So the common belief is that Texas's enslaved population were the last slaves to be freed. It's not actually true, but that's a complicated story for another time, but it is why Juneteenth is often seen as a celebration of the end of slavery. And in the next year, on June 19th, 1866, blacks in Galveston, Texas, inaugurated the Juneteenth holiday as a celebration of their freedom and their survival. So that was 160 years ago today. And so for many, that's the distant past, and that's a conception that allows for dismissive takes when it comes to slavery's significance and the state of racism in the present-day United States. But I'll have you consider this. Next year, on February 19th, exactly 8 months from today, my father will turn 80. So from my view, we are but 2 dads away from the end of slavery. So, like I said, it's all relative. Another example. In the decade following the Civil War, 1,500 black men were elected to state or local offices. And 2 black men were elected to Congress as senators. Within the 10 years after slavery ended, an institution that had been in this nation's history for 250 years. That's crazy. Want to guess how many black senators we've had since? 12. 5 of whom are serving right now. So, after those 2 black senators were elected immediately after slavery, there was not another black senator until 1967. That's almost 100 years. Hell, Barack Obama was only our 5th black senator in this nation's history. So what happened after those first 2? The answer is redemption. During the 10 years after the Civil War, the period known as Reconstruction, federal troops occupied the former Confederate states to protect the rights of the newly emancipated, the freedmen. And Congress passed the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, which respectively abolished slavery, mostly, granted African American citizenship and theoretically the rights and protections that went along with it, and granted black men the right to vote. No women had the right to vote at this time. But then in 1876, those federal troops withdrew from the South. And immediately, white supremacists, who called themselves the Redeemers, began a concerted campaign to roll back all the rights and progress that African Americans had achieved in the previous decade. So, a campaign to redeem the South. And they accomplished this by instituting what are known as black codes, which criminalized all sorts of behaviors. They created white primaries, literacy tests, and poll tasks, which squashed the black vote. And they established extremist groups that terrorized blacks with violent methods, not the least of which was lynching. So it took 25 years, but by 1900, the Redeemers had effectively disenfranchised Southern black men and nullified blacks' political representation. Imprisoned, or as some would say, re-enslaved, and that includes me, I would say that, re-enslaved black men, women, and children through the institutions of convict leasing and sharecropping. Denied blacks equal access and accommodations under the doctrine of separate but equal, and segregated blacks in ways that demarcated and solidified their supposed inferiority. So, see, I told you, heavy. So why this history lesson? Stay with me. In 1965, standing on the steps of the Alabama State Capitol, Martin Luther King Jr. uttered this now famous phrase, quote, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice," which people often quote to inspire those working for social change and/or to advise those working against it. But here's the second essential truth, which history bears out. Arcs have 2 downsides. So yes, the arc of the moral universe may bend towards justice, but it can, and it does, also bend back, and sometimes very fast and very hard. And I say this because, make no mistake, 160 years after the end of slavery, we are witnessing, or more accurately, we are experiencing another concerted campaign for redemption. And the Redeemers this time are moving at a breakneck speed and covering a lot of ground. And if that's not abundantly clear, strap in. In the last 18 months, the Voting Rights Act has been gutted. The Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division has been gutted. The Department of Health and Human Services has been gutted. The Fair Housing Act is not being enforced. Black unemployment has risen to 7%, while the national rate remains steady at 4%. Massive cuts have been made to Medicaid, Medicare, SNAP, programs that over 25% of black families rely on to some extent. Thousands of federal grants for projects deemed DEI-related have been terminated or paused. Funding to historically black colleges and universities has been eliminated or frozen. Student loan payment relief programs are being eliminated or scaled back. Black studies and ethnic studies programs are being eliminated and scaled back. Teachings on structural racism have been legislated out of K through 12 classrooms. Black authored or black themed books and books having to do with racism have been banned in schools and libraries. These include books such as I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, The Color Purple, Their Eyes Were Watching God, and Beloved. Federal agencies can no longer observe Martin Luther King Day or Juneteenth or Black History Month. The National Museum of African American Culture and History was pressured to remove exhibits and artifacts, which included an original copy of Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, naval ships named after people of color, such as Harriet Tubman, Thurgood Marshall, Dolores Huerta, have been targeted for renaming. Names connected to the Confederacy have been restored to military bases, while Confederate statues and monuments have been reinstalled. Racial profiling is now legally permissible. The federal death penalty has been restored. Over 50% of the people on death row are people of color. Jurisdictions with cashless bail programs are being targeted, and this matters because black men receive bail amounts 3 to 4% higher than white men. Legal entry for immigrants or refugees from African, Caribbean, and Southwest Asian countries has been radically curtailed. Protected status for people from Nicaragua, Venezuela, Honduras, Cuba, and Haiti have been revoked. At the same time, the U.S. refugee program has been restructured to service or favor white populations, and people are being detained, deported, and disappeared without due process, regardless of citizenship or their legal resident status. And finally, there's ICE. I don't think I need to say anything more about that. So 2 things about this rundown I've just provided. One, it's an abbreviated list, a very abbreviated list. Second, if one of my students used as much passive voice as I just did, I would nail them for being afraid to assert something, obscuring somebody's agency, and or worse, protecting somebody. I am not a do as I say, not as I do person, and I am not about protecting the agents here. So let me be clear. The current administration and its allies are pursuing a calculated, persistent, malicious, racist, cruel, and disturbingly effective campaign to subjugate black and brown people, among others, by disenfranchising, denigrating, discrediting, detaining, and disappearing us. We must name and keep track of these actors, lest we lose sight of their action. Case in point, when I was in graduate school, I took a seminar on slavery. And after we had traced the roots of slavery in mainland North America back to Africa and studied the position of slavery in relationship to the nation's founding, the professor gave us a short essay prompt. Quote, "Could the founding fathers have abolished slavery?" My essay was very short. Yes, the founding fathers could have abolished slavery. Easy, done. Except that out of the 8 to 10 students that were in the seminar, I was the only one who took that stance. Everyone else said, nope, not possible. But that's because they were attending to an implied second part of that question. Could the founding fathers have abolished slavery and the nation survived? Now, if that had been the prompt, I would have fallen in with my peers. No, it's unlikely that the United States would have survived and grown as it did or become what it is if the founders had abolished slavery. But that wasn't the question. Nevertheless, I spent the next hour in a very lopsided debate during which I was accused of, quote, taking things too personally and being purposely difficult. Don't worry, that's chum in the water for me. So I countered that by saying they were purposely and desperately focusing on a question of outcome so as to avoid wrestling with a matter of choice. Could the founding fathers have abolished slavery? Of course they could have. They chose not to, for reasons that I totally understand, but it was a choice. The one thing about today is it's windy. So what's my point? Well, that brings us to the third and final truth that all historians will tell you. Nothing is inevitable except change over time, which is to say that the current deterioration of democracy and the regression of certain people's rights and belonging isn't just happening. People are making it happen, and people are letting it happen. In other words, people are making choices. But this is where hope comes in, because they can make different choices. We can make different choices, but they might be hard. In fact, given the change necessary, I can guarantee you they will be hard. This past year, my institution, along with many others across higher education, made the risk-averse decision to abide by the federal government's determination that any and all equity initiatives are a violation of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So don't even get me started on the galling irony of that. And as you might imagine, this has adversely impacted Black faculty, staff, and students, among others, and it will continue to do so. I get it. I don't agree with it, but I get it. The fear is losing federal funding, which is no small thing. And leadership's position is that they have no choice. But of course they do. And I, along with a handful of others, have said so, repeatedly, loudly, and publicly. I know that surprises you. But that has been to my detriment. And recently, I was talking to my mother about this, questioning my actions because I worry that my actions could result in or require changes that will affect my family, my daughter. Being a good mother, she told me that my child will respect and appreciate my choices when she's older. I told her I'm worried about my child's experiences, sense of security, and happiness now. To which she said, okay, if I had had the same choices to make as you, what would you have had me do? Because she knows that I know that she would make the same choices. And in fact, that she did make the same choices, which is why I am who I am, why I am where I am, and why I know that this is bigger than me. This is bigger than my family. This is even bigger than my daughter. So all I could say was, damn it, Mom. To which she said, all right then. To which I say, all right then. Thank you. Shouldn't look down. Thank you. It's very nice. Thank you very much. It's been a hard year. So I am charged with starting this reading off. So again, Frederick Douglass gave this speech on July 5th, 1852 in Rochester, New York, before a predominantly white audience. Think about that as you're hearing this. Mr. President, friends, and fellow citizens, this, for the purpose of this celebration, is the 4th of July. It is the birthday of your national independence and of your political freedom. This, to you, is what the Passover was to the emancipated people of God. It carries your minds back to the day and to the act of your great deliverance, and to the signs and to the wonders associated with that act and that day. This celebration also marks the beginning of another year of your national life and reminds you that the Republic of America is now 76 years old. I am glad, fellow citizens, that your nation is so young. 76 years, though a good old age for a man, is but a mere speck in the life of a nation. 70 years and 10 is the allotted time for individual men, but nations number their years by thousands. According to this fact, you are, even now, only in the beginning of your national career, still lingering in the period of childhood. I repeat, I am glad this is so. There is hope in the thought, and hope is much needed under the dark clouds which lower above the horizon.
Fellow citizens, 76 years ago, the people of this country were British subjects. The style and title of your sovereign people, in which you now glory, was not then born. You were under the British crown. Your fathers esteemed the English government as the home government, England as the fatherland, although a considerable distance from your home, impose, in the exercise of its parental prerogatives upon its colonial children, such restraints, burdens, and limitations as, in its mature judgment, it deemed wise, right, and proper.
But your fathers, who had not adopted the idea of the infallibility of government, and the absolute character of its acts presumed to differ from the home government in respect to the wisdom and the justice of some of these burdens and restraints. They went so far as to pronounce the measures of government unjust, unreasonable, and oppressive, and altogether such as ought not to be quietly submitted to. I scarcely need say, fellow citizens, that my opinion of those measures fully accords with that of your fathers. Feeling themselves harshly and unjustly treated by the home government, your fathers, like men of honesty and men of spirit, earnestly sought redress. They petitioned and remonstrated. They did so in a decorous, respectful, and loyal manner. This, however, did not answer the purpose. They saw themselves treated with sovereign indifference, coldness, and scorn. Yet they persevered. Oppression makes a wise man mad. Your fathers became restive under this treatment. They felt themselves the victims of grievous wrongs, wholly incurable in their colonial capacity. With brave men, there is always a remedy for oppression. Just here, the idea of a total separation of the colonies from the crown was born. It was a startling idea, much more so than we, at this distance of time, regard it. The timid and the prudent of the day were, of course, shocked and alarmed by it. Their opposition to the then dangerous thought was earnest and powerful. But amid all their terror and affrighted vociferations against it, the alarming and revolutionary idea moved on, and the country with it.
On the 2nd of July, 1776, the old Continental Congress, to the dismay of the lovers of ease and the worshippers of property, clothed that dreadful idea with all the authority of national sanction. They did so in the form of a resolution. We seldom hit upon resolutions drawn up in our day whose transparency is at all equal. It resolved that these united colonies are, and of right, ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown. Citizens, your fathers made good that resolution. They succeeded, and today you reap the fruits of their success. The freedom gained is yours, and you, therefore, may properly celebrate this anniversary. The 4th of July is the first great fact in your nation's history, the very ring bolt in the chain of your yet undeveloped destiny.
Pride and patriotism, no less than gratitude, prompt you to celebrate and to hold it in perpetual remembrance. I have said that the Declaration of Independence is the ring bolt to the chain of your nation's destiny. So, indeed, I regard it. The principles contained in that instrument are saving principles. Stand by those principles. Be true to them on all occasions, in all places, against all foes, at whatever cost. Fellow citizens, I am not wanting in respect for the fathers of this republic. The signers of the Declaration of Independence were brave men. I cannot contemplate their great deeds with less than admiration. They were statesmen, patriots, and heroes, and for the good they did and the principles they contended for, I will unite with you to honor their memory.
They love their country better than their own private interests, and all will concede that is a rare virtue, and all the command respect he who will intelligently lay down his life for his country, and the man whom is not a human nature to despise. Your fathers staked their lives for their fortunes and their sacred honor, because their country admiration of liberty and lost sight of all other interests.
They were peacemen, but they preferred revolution to peaceful submission to bondage. They were quiet men, but they did not shrink from agitating against oppression. They showed forbearance, but they knew its limits. They believed in order, but not in the order of tyranny. With them, nothing was settled. That was not right. With them, justice, liberty, and humanity were final, not slavery and oppression. You may well cherish the memory of such men. They were great in their day and generation. Their solid manhood stands out the more as we contrast it with these degenerate times. How circumspect, exact, and proportionate were all their movements. How unlike the politicians of an hour. Their statesmanship looked beyond the passing moment and stretched away in strength into the distant future. Mark them, fully appreciating the hardship to be encountered, firmly believing in the right of their cause, wisely measuring the terrible odds against them. Your fathers, the fathers of this republic, laid the cornerstone of the national superstructure, which is risen and still rises in grandeur around you.
Of this fundamental work, this day is the anniversary. Our eyes are met with demonstrations of joyous enthusiasm. The causes which led to the separation of the colonies from the British Crown have never lacked for a tongue. They have all been taught in your common schools, narrated at your firesides, unfolded from your pulpits, and thundered from your legislative halls, and are as familiar to you as household words. They form the staple of your national poetry and eloquence. I leave, therefore, the great deeds of your fathers to others. My business, if I have any here today, is with the present. The accepted time with God and His cause is the ever-living now. We have to do with the past only as we can make it useful to the present and to the future. Now is the time, the important time. Your fathers have lived, died, and have done their work, and have done much of it well. You live and must die, and you must do your work. You have no right to enjoy a child's share in the labor of your fathers, unless your children are to be blessed by your labors. You have no right to wear out and waste the hard-earned fame of your fathers to cover your indolence.
Fellow citizens, pardon me, allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I therefore called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar and to confess the benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us? Would to God, both of your sakes and ours, that an affirmative answer could be truthfully returned to these questions. Then would my task be light and my burden easy and delightful. But such is not the state of the case. I say it with a sad sense of the disparity between us. I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us.
The blessings in which you, this day, rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers, it is shared by you, not by me. The sunlight that brought life and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn. To drag a man in fetters into the grand illuminated temple of liberty and call upon him to join you in joyous anthems were in human mockery and sacrilegious irony. Do you mean, citizens, to mock me by asking me to speak today? Fellow citizens, about your national tumultuous joy. I hear the mournful wail of millions, whose chains, heavy and grievous yesterday, are today rendered more intolerable by the jubilee shouts that reach them. To forget them, to pass lightly over their wrongs, and to shame in which the popular theme will be treason, most scandalous and shocking, and will make me reproach before God and the world.
My subject, then, fellow citizens, is American slavery. I shall see this day from the slave's point of view. Standing here, identified with the American bondman making his wrongs mine, I do not hesitate to declare with all my soul that the character and conduct of this nation never looked blacker to me than on this 4th of July. Whether we turn to the declarations of the past or to the professions of the present, the conduct of the nation seems equally hideous and revolting. America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly binds herself to be false to the future. Standing with God and the crushed and bleeding slave on this occasion, I will, in the name of humanity which is outraged, in the name of liberty which is fettered, in the name of the Constitution and the Bible which are disregarded and trampled upon, dare to call in question and to denounce with all the emphasis that I can command everything that serves to perpetuate slavery, the great sin and shame of America. I will not equivocate. I will not excuse. I will use the severest language I can command. And yet not one word shall escape me that any man whose judgment is not blinded by prejudice or who is not at heart a slaveholder shall not confess to be right and just.
I fancy I hear some of my audience say it is just in this circumstance that you and your brother abolitionists fail to make a favorable impression on the public mind. Would you argue more and denounce less? Would you persuade more and rebuke less? Your cause would be much more likely to succeed. But I submit, where all is plain, there is nothing to be argued. What point in the anti-slavery creed would you have me argue? On what branch of the subject do the people of this country need light? Must I undertake to prove that the slave is a man? The slaveholders themselves acknowledge it in the enactment of laws for their government. They acknowledge it when they punish disobedience on the part of the slave. There are 72 crimes in the state of Virginia which, if committed by a black man, submit him to the punishment of death, while only 2 of the same crimes will subject a white man to the like punishment. What is this but the acknowledgement that the slave is a moral, intellectual, and responsible being?
Southern statute books are covered with enactments forbidding, under severe fines and penalties, the teaching of the slave to read or to write. When you can point to any such laws in reference to the beasts of the field, then I may consent to argue the manhood of the slave. When the dogs in your streets, when the fowls of the air, when the cattle on your hills, when the fish of the sea, and the reptiles that crawl, shall be unable to distinguish the slave from a brute, then I will argue with you that the slave is not a man.
Is it not astonishing that while we are plowing, planting, and reaping, using all kinds of mechanical tools, erecting houses, constructing bridges, building ships, working on metals of brass, iron, copper, silver, and gold, that while we are reading, writing, and ciphering, acting as clerks, merchants, and secretaries, having among us lawyers, doctors, ministers, poets, authors, editors, orators, and teachers, that while we are engaged in all manner of enterprises common to other men, digging gold in California, capturing the whale in the Pacific, feeding sheep and cattle on the hillside, living, moving, acting, thinking, planning, living in families as husbands, wives, and children, and above all, confessing and worshiping the Christian's God, and looking hopefully for life and immortality beyond the grave, for we are called upon to prove that we are men.
Would you have me argue that man is entitled to liberty? That he is the rightful owner of his own body? You have already declared it. Must I argue the wrongfulness of slavery? Is it to be settled by the rules of logic and argumentation as a matter beset with great difficulty, involving a doubtful application of the principle of justice, hard to understand? How should I look today in the presence of Americans to show that men have a natural right to freedom? To do so would make myself ridiculous and to offer an insult to your understanding. There is not a man beneath the canopy of heaven that does not know that slavery is wrong for him. What? Am I to argue that it is wrong to make men brutes? To rob them of their liberty? To work them without wages? To keep them ignorant of their relations to their fellow men? To beat them with sticks? To flay their flesh with the lash? To load their limbs with irons? To hunt them with dogs? To sell them at auction? To sunder their families? To knock out their teeth? To burn their flesh? To starve them into obedience and submission to their masters? Must I argue that a system thus marked with blood and stained with pollution is wrong? No, I will not. I have better employments for my time and strength than such arguments would imply.
What then remains to be argued? Is it that slavery is not divine? That God did not establish it? That our doctors of divinity are mistaken? There is blasphemy in the thought. That which is inhuman cannot be divine. Who with reason can such a proposition? I cannot. The time for such an argument is past. At a time like this, scorching irony, not convincing argument, is needed. Oh, had I the ability and could reach the nation's ear, I would today pour out a fiery stream of biting ridicule, blasting reproach, withering sarcasm, and stern rebuke. For it is not light that is needed, but fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake. The feeling of the nation must be quickened. The conscience of the nation must be roused. The propriety of the nation must be startled. The hypocrisy of the nation must be exposed. And its crimes against God and man must be proclaimed and denounced.
What, to the American slave, is your 4th of July? I answer. A day that reveals to him, more than all other days in the year, the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham, your boasted liberty an unholy license, your national greatness swelling vanity, your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless, your denunciations of tyrants brass-fronted impudence, your shouts of liberty and equality hollow mockery, your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings with all your religious parade and solemnity are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy, a thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a nation on the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of these United States at this very hour. Go where you may, search where you will, roam through all the monarchies and despotisms of the old world, search out every abuse, and when you have found the last, lay your facts by the side of the everyday practices of this nation, and you will say with me that, for revolting barbarity and shameless hypocrisy, America reigns without a rival.
Take the American slave trade, which we are told by the papers is especially prosperous just now, as the price of men was never higher, and which is carried on in all the large towns and cities in 1/2 of this Confederacy. This trade is one of the peculiarities of American institutions. In several states, this trade is a chief source of wealth. It is called the internal slave trade, in order to divert from it the horror with which the foreign slave trade is contemplated. The foreign slave trade has long since been denounced by this government as piracy, as an execrable traffic. To arrest it, this nation keeps a squadron at immense cost on the coast of Africa. Everywhere in this country, it is safe to speak of this foreign slave trade as a most inhuman traffic, opposed alike to the laws of God and of man. It is, however, a notable fact that while so much execration is poured out by Americans upon those engaged in the foreign slave trade, the men engaged in the slave trade between the states pass without condemnation, and their business is deemed honorable.
Behold, the practical operation of this internal slave trade, the American slave trade, sustained by American politics and American religion. Here you will see men and women reared like swine for the market. You know what a swine drover? I will show you a man drover. They inhabit all our southern states. They perambulate the country and crowd the highways of the nation with droves of human stock. You will see one of these human flesh jobbers armed with pistols, whip, and bowie knife, driving a company of 100 men, women, and children from the Potomac to the slave market in New Orleans. These wretched people are to be sold singly, or in lots, or suit purchasers. They are food for the cotton field and the deadly sugar mill.
Mark the sad procession as it moves wearily along, and the inhuman wretch who drives them. Hear his savage yells and his blood-chilling oaths as he hurries on his affrighted captives. There, see the old man with locks thinned and gray. Cast one glance, if you please, upon that young mother whose shoulders are bare to the scorching sun, her briny tears falling on the brow of the babe in her arms. See, too, that girl of 13 weeping, yes, weeping, as she thinks of the mother from whom she has been torn. The drove moves tardily. Heat and sorrow have nearly consumed their strength. Suddenly you hear a quick snap, like the discharge of a rifle. The fetters clank and the chain rattles simultaneously. Your ears are saluted with a scream that seems to have torn its way to the center of your soul. The crack you heard was the sound of the slave whip. The scream you heard was from the woman you saw with the babe. Her speed had faltered under the weight of her child and her chains. That gash on her shoulder tells her to move on. Follow this drove to New Orleans. Attend the auction. See men examined like horses. See the forms of women rudely and brutally exposed to the shocking gaze of American slave buyers. See this drove sold and separated forever. And never forget the deep, sad sobs that arose from that scattered multitude. Tell me, citizens, where under the sun can you witness a spectacle more fiendish and shocking? Yet this is but a glance at the American slave trade as it exists at this moment in the ruling part of the United States.
I was born amid such sights and scenes. To me, the American slave trade is a terrible reality. The fleshmongers gather up their victims by dozens and drive them chained to the General Depot at Baltimore. When a sufficient number has been collected here, a ship is chartered for the purpose of conveying the forlorn crew to Mobile or to New Orleans. From the slave prison to the ship, they are usually driven in the darkness of night. In the deep, still darkness of midnight, I have been often aroused by the dead, heavy footsteps and the piteous cries of the chained gangs that passed our door. Fellow citizens, this murderous traffic is today in active operation in this boasted republic. In the solitude of my spirit, I see clouds of dust raised on the highways of the South. I see bleeding footsteps. I hear the doleful wail of fettered humanity on the way to the slave markets, where the victims are to be sold like horses, sheep, and swine, knocked off to the highest bidder. There, I see the tenderest ties ruthlessly broken to gratify the lust, caprice, and rapacity of the buyers and sellers of men. My soul sickens at the sight.
But a still more inhumane, disgraceful, and scandalous state of things remains to be presented. By an act of the American Congress, not yet 2 years old, slavery has been nationalized in its most horrible and revolting form. Mason and Dixon's line has been obliterated, New York has become as Virginia, and the power to hold, hunt, and sell men, women, and children as slaves remains no longer a mere state institution, but is now an institution of the whole United States. The power is coextensive with the Star-Spangled Banner and American Christianity. Where these go, may also go the merciless slave hunter. Where these are, man is not sacred. He is a bird for the sportsman's gun. By that most foul and fiendish of all human decrees, the liberty and person of every man are put in peril. Your broad Republican domain is hunting ground for men.
Your lawmakers have commanded all good citizens to engage in this hellish sport. Your president, your secretary of state enforce as a duty you owe to your free and glorious country and to your God, that you do this accursed thing. Not fewer than 40 Americans have within the past 2 years been hunted down and without moment's warning hurried away in chains and consigned to slavery and excruciating torture. Some of these have had wives and children dependent on them from breed, but of this no account was made. The right of the hunter to his prey stands superior to the right of marriage, and to all rights in this republic the rights of God include.
For black men, there is neither law nor justice, humanity nor religion. The fugitive slave law makes mercy to them a crime and bribes the judge who tries them. An American judge gets $10 for every victim he consigns to slavery, and $5 when he fails to do so. The oath of any two villains is sufficient under this hell-black enactment to send the most pious and exemplary black man into the remorseless jaws of slavery. His own testimony is nothing. He can bring no witness for himself. The minister of American justice is bound by the law to hear but one side, and that side is the side of the oppressor.
Let this damning fact be perpetually told. Let it be thundered around the world that the tyrant-killing, king-hating, people-loving, democratic, Christian America, the seats of justice are filled with judges who hold their offices under an open and palpable bribe and are bound in deciding the case of man's liberty to hear only his accusers. In glaring violation of justice and shameful disregard of the forms of administrating law, in cunning arrangement to entrap the defenseless and the diabolical intent, this fugitive slave law stands alone in the annals of tyrannical justice.
Americans, your Republican politics
not less than your Republican religion, are flagrantly inconsistent. You boast of your love of liberty, your superior civilization, and your pure Christianity, while the whole political power of the nation is solemnly pledged to support and perpetrate the enslavement of 3 million of your countrymen. You hurl your anathemas at the crowned-headed tyrants of Russia and Austria and pride yourself on your democratic institutions, while you yourselves consent to be mere tools and bodyguards of the tyrants of Virginia and Carolina.
You invite to your shores fugitives of oppression from abroad. Honor them with banquets, greet them with ovations, cheer them, toast them, salute them, protect them, and pour out your money to them like water. But the fugitives from your own land, you advertise, hunt, arrest, shoot, and kill. You glory in your refinement and your universal education, yet you maintain a system as barbarous and dreadful as ever stained the character of a nation. A system begun in avarice, supported in pride, and perpetuated in cruelty. You shed tears over fallen Hungary and make the sad story of her wrongs the theme of your poets, statesmen, and orators, till your gallant sons are ready to fly to arms to vindicate her cause against the oppressor. But in regard to the 10,000 wrongs of the American slave, you would enforce the strictest silence and would hail him as an enemy of the nation who dares to make those wrongs the subject of public discourse. You are all on fire at the mention of liberty for France or for Ireland, but are as cold as an iceberg at the thought of liberty for the enslaved of America.
You discourse eloquently on the dignity of labor, yet you sustain a system which, in its very essence, casts a stigma upon labor. You can bare your bosom to the storm of British artillery to throw off a 3-penny tax on tea, and yet writing the last hard-earned farthing from the grasp of the black laborers of your country. You profess to believe that, of one blood, God made all nations of men to dwell on the face of all the earth, and hath commanded all men everywhere to love one another. Yet you notoriously hate, and glory in your hatred, all men whose skins are not colored like your own. You declare before the world, and are understood by the world to declare, that you hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And yet you hold securely in a bondage which, according to your own Thomas Jefferson, is worse than ages of that which your fathers rose in rebellion to oppose, a 7th part of the inhabitants of your country.
Fellow citizens, I will not enlarge further on your national inconsistencies. The existence of slavery in this country brands your republicanism as a sham, your humanity as a base pretense, and your Christianity as a lie. It destroys your moral power abroad. It corrupts your politicians at home. It saps the foundation of religion. It makes your name a hissing and a byword to a mocking earth. It is the antagonistic force in your government, the only thing that seriously disturbs and endangers your union. It fetters your progress. It is the enemy of improvement, the deadly foe of education. It fosters pride. It breeds insolence. It promotes vice. It shelters crime. It is a curse to the earth that supports it, and yet you cling to it as if it were a sheet anchor of all your hopes. Be warned, a horrible reptile is coiled up in your nation's bosom. The venomous creature is nursing at the tender breast of your youthful republic. For the love of God, tear away and fling from you the hideous monster, and let the weight of 20 millions crush and destroy it forever.
But it is answered in reply to all this that precisely what I have denounced is, in fact, guaranteed and sanctioned by the Constitution of the United States, that the right to hold and to hunt slaves is a part of that Constitution framed by the illustrious father of this republic. Then I dare to affirm, notwithstanding all I have said before, your fathers, instead of being the honest men I have before declared them to be, were various impostors that ever practiced on mankind. This is the inevitable conclusion, and from it there is no escape. But I defer from those who charge this baseness on the framers of the Constitution of the United States. It is a slander upon their memory, at least so I believe, and others have, as I think, fully and clearly vindicated the Constitution from any design to support slavery for an hour.
Allow me to say, in conclusion, notwithstanding the dark picture I have this day presented of the state of the nation, I do not despair of this country. There are forces in operation which must inevitably work the downfall of slavery. I therefore leave off where I began, with hope. While drawing encouragement from the Declaration of Independence, the great principles it contains, and the genius of American institutions, my spirit is cheered by the obvious tendencies of the age. Nations do not now stand in the same relation to each other as they did ages ago. No nation can shut itself up from the surrounding world and trot round in the same old paths of its fathers without interference.
The time was when such could be done, but a change has now come over the affairs of mankind. Walled cities and empires have become unfashionable. The arm of commerce has borne away the gates of the strong city. Intelligence is penetrating the dark corners of the globe. Wind, steam, and lightning are its chartered agents. Oceans no longer divide, but link nations together. From Boston to London is now a holiday excursion. Space is comparatively annihilated. Thoughts expressed on one side of the Atlantic are distinctly heard on the other. In the fervent aspirations of William Lloyd Garrison, I say, and let every heart join in saying it. If you would now stand with me and say, all God's speed, when human blood shall cease to flow. In every clime be understood the claims of human brotherhood, and each return for evil good, not blow for blow. That day will come, all feuds to end, and change into a faithful friend each foe. Thank you.
I'd like to conclude by sharing the names of all the readers, if we could hold our applause till the end and give them the warm thank you they deserve. Brenna Greer, Brinley Vickers, Robert Awkward, Rosalind Rubin, Susan Masad, Isla Ring, Tracy Franklin, Cynthia McReynolds, Bruno Giles, Miriam Hernandez Jennings, Marianne Barkowski, Dan Fields, Bay Kafetz, June Ring, Thomas Mahard, Lynn Fantelli, Marley Wiest, Martha Mahard, Judith Allen Shaw, Bruce Evans, Robin Melendez, Karen Woods Wireman, Maddie, Deborah Mitchell, last name Maddie, Maddie Weston, thank you, Deborah Mitchell, Linda Wade, Donna McKenzie, Becky Binns, Richard Sidney, Rosalind Rubin, Tad Irving, Adam Isbitsky, and Katie and James. Thank you all for lending your voices to this speech. Thank you so much.